October 7th, 2023 lives rent-free in my memory for many reasons. One of these reasons is the brutal terrorist attack visited upon the Israelis and foreigners in Israel by Hamas. This was planned and executed with horrific precision in mind, and we can't forget that. Now, another reason this event sits in my mind is a little bit more philosophical. I am a veteran. I've seen my share of garbage that human beings can create for themselves and others. People can do terrible stuff to one another. Unfortunately, this isn't changing anytime soon, and I'm not totally surprised, to be honest. While we're not entirely surprised by the human capacity to do heinous stuff, I don't think I'm alone in hoping that this isn't a regular part of our reality. But then again, it's best to be prepared for anything these days. That's why folks like me have a job, making sure that other things aren't a rule, but an exception. The ongoing situation in Israel between the Israelis and Gazans hits pretty hard. Father of the Year on this one. I read ground news every single day. I read this feel-good article about a dad who rescued his daughter after she fell from a cruise ship. It's kind of interesting. You go over the bias distribution graph ground news provides, and you'll see it was covered equally by the left, right, and center. Now, I read more about the story in People magazine, and it said the dad jumped over the railing because he put his daughter on top of the railing and she fell. So, he kind of made the problem happen. And I looked here on Ground News, which shows the publication data, so you know who's telling you what to think, whether it leans left or right, and the factuality rating of the publication. So, People magazine said this guy put his daughter on the railing. It's of high factuality. That means it's probably accurate. Now, another neat feature of Ground News is the Blind Spot Report. It gives you an idea of stories you may have missed because of your personal biases. Like if you lean left, you might not have noticed that a UN chief urged more aid due to climate change. If you lean right, you might not have seen that the U.S. intends to restart trade negotiations with Canada. Listen, I read Ground News every day as part of my morning routine. I pay for it. They do not give it to me for free. I even bought a copy for my dad. So click the link in the description below, go to this QR code up here, or go to ground.news/Ryan to get 40% off the Advantage plan, which is the same plan that I use. I've said it in the past, I see Arabs in general and Palestinians in particular as good people, and this is true minus the ones who aren't. I deployed to Egypt and Iraq. I genuinely tried to learn the language and the culture. I read the Quran in English. I speak okay Arabic, although I talk like an Egyptian, which I suppose is better than walking like an Egyptian or driving like one. My heart goes out to the Israelis who have to step into the breach once again to do something few others know or even care about. And I think about those who are lost before and after. The rumblings of a potential long-term peace are of interest to me, you could say, and I'm not the only one. The Israelis and their neighbors have been at war for decades, and slowly, ever so slowly, Israel's neighbors have gone from a gang of sworn enemies to kind of conducting meaningful dialogue and business with the Israelis. The last military operation in Gaza felt like the last, at least for some, and the world kind of moved on. Then October 7th happened, shaking everything to its core, and the region erupted in fire. Men, women, children were taken hostage, stolen from their friends and their families. Many died, some are still out there, and others, the lucky ones, made it back home. I have to admit, I was skeptical of anything long-term coming in to keep the peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and I'm not the only one on this. Wars in the Middle East, and even those surrounding Israel in particular, have been inevitable, right? It's like, oh, it's just another day in the Middle East. Heck, I grew up while the conflict was going on in Lebanon, but nothing is ever inevitable, even war. A follower of mine, an Israeli, reached out concerning the situation in Gaza, and I'll admit I was skeptical at first, and this follower mentioned Gazans. Everyday Gazans were standing up to Hamas. And we all know what Hamas likes to do with those who stand in their way, right? They throw them off a building. Groups like Hamas, life is cheap, and bullets or buildings are cheaper still, and it solves their problems. To see and hear that Gazans have lived under the iron grip of Hamas rule since 2007, rising up against Hamas and its rule, it kind of fills me with optimism here. So could long-term peace become reality? How is this even possible? Well, it might seem like the pipe dream, some kind of pro-Israeli propaganda here. It's really not. Gazans see Hamas's rule as illegitimate, and can we blame them? Probably not, right? Every day, Gazans have been caught in the crossfire of this ongoing operation in Gaza. When I covered the order of battle for Hamas, I mentioned a ground operation in Gaza would severely impact Gazans who are jammed together in tight urban spaces, not a lot of places to hide, not a lot of places to retreat when the shooting starts. Civilian casualties have been a consequence of that combat environment, and Hamas's cruel calculus for exacting as much vengeance as they can on the Israelis also factors into that. Much to the chagrin of useful idiots, the Israelis have conducted themselves fairly professionally in the war. They provided aid, retreat routes for civilians, ample warnings before moving into crowded urban areas. Now, the Center for Peace Communications, which operates out of the U.S., has conducted anti-extremist campaigns and outreach programs in North Africa, Middle East, to promote regional peace and security. Some of the CPC's posting on X, formerly Twitter, appear to show legitimate footage from the ground where Gazans have been more regularly protesting Hamas's rule. And Hamas's rule has been brutal for many in Gaza. Hamas is a religious and politically extremist organization bent on the destruction of Israel and its people. Hamas is no friend of the West. It is no friend of the region. When President Trump made his Gaza Riviera comments, many in the U.S. and Israel and Western Europe, they laughed or were shocked by the audacity of his suggestions. Well, the Riviera comments were like a political tool to kind of shake action from the Muslim world. Like, in a way, it kind of offered the Gazans an opportunity. No, doesn't necessarily mean a mass exodus of Gazans from Gaza to anywhere else, despite how it was spun in the media. Instead, like, these comments, as out of touch as they sound, have forced the conversation concerning a long-term peace to start. So what happens next to the Gazans? Well, President Trump's comments have prompted serious legal and moral questions concerning a U.S. occupation of a cleared-out Gaza. His comments have scared heel-dragging Muslim leaders in the region to kind of talk about what comes next. And kind of weird, it takes a bloody war and some crazy talk from Trump to get things moving again, but Gaza is going to need to get rebuilt. Gaza has to get rebuilt for a lasting peace to take hold. But rebuilding isn't going to happen if the world and the region can't agree on what comes next. When I was initially writing this video, Hamas and the U.S. were arguing over the finer points of releasing hostages for a ceasefire. You know, peace seems far off, even with these talks taking place. Long-term peace will require some serious structural and political changes to occur. One of these changes could be Hamas turning over power to some provisional authority to allow Gazans to decide their own fate within the confines of existing peacefully with Israel. A provisional authority will need protection from Hamas elements that still linger in the shadows. It would require long-term Israeli commitments to Gazan political security. If a provisional authority backed by an international arena is untenable, then we need to kind of consider a future where Hamas is in charge. Under these conditions, Hamas will need to make concessions. While I doubt this will happen, Hamas, under this contingency, will need to recognize Israel as a legitimate country in order for the reconstruction in Gaza to take place. Hamas will also need to agree to third-party inspections, ensuring aid getting to the Gazans is getting to the Gazans, and also ensuring that Hamas isn't building up for the next big fight. Gaza's reconstruction at first will need to focus on bringing back necessities: power, water, medical treatment, food. This could be accomplished with Israel and the U.S. leading world and regional partners to funnel money, supplies, technical assistance into Gaza. Look, nobody does logistics better than the U.S. This is just the beginning. Gaza will need adequate housing, educational facilities, economic infrastructure that brings self-sufficiency and security, and in turn, peace between Gazans and the Israelis. These projects will require long-term planning and commitment. Gaza can't be tomorrow's news again, only to have a repeat of something like October 7th in a decade or two. But like I've said, nothing stops a bullet like a job. Another thing required here is something I keep repeating. The U.S. needs to be a leader, not an isolationist, just retreating from problems all over the globe. We need to stop retreating from the global system that we helped create and defend, hoping to kind of like bury our heads in the sand on our island of the Western Hemisphere. The Israelis deserve better. The Gazans, not Hamas, but the Gazans deserve better. We also need to get the Russians, the Europeans, the Muslim world, and the Chinese to play ball here. Well, I'm dreaming I want a pony. But look, October 7th should be the exception, not the rule. We can't expect peace when everything is burning to the ground and gasoline keeps getting dumped on it. The First World War taught the world a lesson that many nations and leaders ignored. We don't always have to obliterate each other, right? We don't always have to reach for the sword. It took a Second World War and a few nasty conflicts afterwards to finally get folks talking about the need to take this a bit more seriously. We can be prosperous and live in peace with our neighbors. International organizations, multinational arrangements, regional partnerships, they could all end the war in Israel and the wider Middle East, if we're honest here. And these sorts of mechanisms have been used in the past. The U.S. also needs to stand firm against the extremists here. We can't retreat from our friends. This is going to take years, probably decades, to get right. And our friends in the region deserve our help. Organizations like Center for Peace Communications are trying to change the narrative away from the extremists who want to see Israel and its people dumped in the sea. We need to support these efforts more seriously too. The extremists started this, not the Israelis. The Israelis deserve to have peace and security. The Gazans, who were forced into this conflict by Hamas, an extremist organization bent on Israel's destruction, they also deserve peace and security. By the time I began finalizing this video script and shooting the video itself, the Israelis and the Iranians are trading shots via missiles and precision strikes, or in Iran's case, not so precision. The region is devolving into chaos, and you might ask yourself, why is this happening? Why now? Well, many will disagree with me here. I find the resurgence of violence in the Middle East to be a symptom of a larger sickness, America's isolationist foreign policy. We're pulling ourselves away from the system we help build and defend. America has played a huge role in securing Middle Eastern peace and elsewhere in the world. I mean, what do you think China and Russia are doing? They're taking notes. They're jotting down when we sit on our hands, when we turn away from the region, the world. This is emboldening the enemies of Israel and in turn the United States. And this isn't going to bode well for anyone, even us. Isolationism sounds like a great idea if you can ignore reality. We bury our head in the sand, we stay neutral, we build the walls of our castles so high that we can't see over them to the danger on the other side. Instead, we leave our friends to fight and die on their own. Israel, Ukraine, Afghanistan, many others. You know, what happens in the world? What happens when we're next? When we have no close friends or allies willing to come to our aid? And that's kind of what I'm concerned about. Look, this is self-funded and YouTube demonetizes a lot of my stuff. Consider supporting me over on Substack at ryanmcbeth. That's substack.com. $5 a month, guys, for in-depth and free content like this. It's a steal. And check out my novels on Amazon. I got Audible for the Marines, Last Republic, and The Wind Machine. My Intel Life t-shirt from Bunker Branding. And thank you guys so much for watching.
In a world where fashion meets firepower, where style becomes strategy, it's time to gear up for the ultimate mission with Bunker Branding. Introducing the Rock Out With Your Chalk Out t-shirt, a tribute to the fearless air cavalry. Feel the adrenaline rush as you don the pride of the skies. For those of you who dare from the air, precision and power unite when you think outside the bomb. And don't miss our Live, Laugh, Launch t-shirts for Patriot and HIMARS, because sometimes defending freedom means bringing the thunder. Finally, for the true defender of the seas, we present Department of the Boat People. Sail with honor and show your allegiance to the world's mightiest maritime force. With these shirts, hoodies, and stickers, along with the tow missile, landmines, and drone warfare. These aren't just shirts, they're statements. They're your way of saying I stand for strength, unity, and style. Get yours at Bunker Branding today.